This week we are studying the last two chapters of Ruth. This is the kinsman redeemer that we're going to be studying about. It's the last two chapters, but the first verses we're going to focus on here are chapter 3, verses 1, 2, 4, and 9 through 11. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that thou may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz one of our kindred, with whom maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. And it shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do. And he said, Who art this? Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not, I will do thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know thou art a virtuous woman. So as last week, in the introduction of Ruth and such, you have Ruth and you have Naomi, and in this time in Israel, all of the property passed down, I'm sure we're talking about all the property passed down through the males of the family. And so you had Naomi, her husband had died, and Ruth had been married to one of her sons, and both of her sons had died. And they had actually moved away from this area, which is basically Bethlehem. They had moved away and into Moab, which is where Ruth's family is from. Naomi's son had married, that's why Ruth is a Moabitess, and then they had moved back to Naomi's homeland in hopes that someone would care for her. Because in last week's verses, there's not provisions for the land, the property being passed down to the women of the family, but there are provisions for widows to be cared for in the gleaning of the grain. You leave so much, and they can come in behind the harvesters and get enough food to live off of. But you have Naomi and Ruth basically living at the mercy of the people of Israel, of the people in the community. And we can only imagine what a struggle it would be. You probably don't even know where your next meal is coming from necessarily. So it's quite an ordeal. And it's what Naomi, her mother-in-law said to her, I will not seek rest for thee, it may be well with thee. And now Boaz, they've recognized that Boaz is one of their kin. Boaz is kin to Naomi's husband. And she's telling her, the Israelites had this program, this plan. Even if, I gotta get rid of this jacket, sorry. The heater's working well today. So you don't pass down the property through the females of the family. It passes down through the males, through the sons, and that's how it's inherited. And also, the property can be sold. It wasn't God's intention for the property to be sold, but things arise, problems come up. A family may find themselves destitute or in need, and they may have to sell their property off in order to pay for whatever. But there's a provision: if property gets sold off, then someone else in the family can redeem that property back at a later date. You can get the property back. You can purchase it back from whomever you had to sell it. You or your heirs can buy that land back. And so they've recognized that Boaz is a member of their family. And there's this law of kinsman redeemer. And Naomi, is what it says in our text here, that she's realized that God hasn't forgotten her. She's been faithful, and she's realized that God hasn't forgotten her, because there's this program, this plan, this law in place. And they have realized that Boaz is a kinsman redeemer. And so, of course, Ruth is new to this country. She doesn't know the laws and the customs. And so Naomi is telling her, here's how it works. Here's what you're going to do. And so she tells her to go down. Ruth already knows Boaz because she had gone and told her where to go and to glean grain and this and that. And she came back and told she told Naomi about the man that was so kind to her. And that's when Naomi realized the person that's been so kind to you he's one of our kin. And so they harvest grain twice a year, and they harvest the grain during the day, and then they winnow it at night. The breezes come in off the Mediterranean, and you have this threshing floor, which is hard rock or hard packed soil, and they will lay the grain out on that and shake the kernels off, and then they take the kernels off the stalk. They take the kernels in, they put them in these big wire baskets, and they're getting the chaff, the outside of the kernels off, and they need the wind for that. And we talked about that recently, but you'll toss that grain up, and as it tosses up and you have a nice little breeze, it blows away the chaff, which weighs practically nothing, and the heavier kernels fall back down in your basket. And so they do that at night when the breezes come up and after it's gotten dark and you can't do any more harvesting. So sounds as though it's a long day, several long days. And everybody doesn't have their own threshing floor, so it's like a communal threshing floor. There's a place where all the community goes. And Boaz is there because of a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to lose your turn. You don't want to lose your spot in line to thresh your grain. And two, you want to protect your grain. You're not going to get it all winnowed out in one day. And not that there's a bunch of thieves around, but there's a bunch of thieves around. And you don't want them stealing your grain, so you stay there, you sleep there and guard your grain. And so Naomi tells Ruth, after he goes and eats and after he goes and drinks, he's going to go lie down. And you figure out where he's going to go lie down. And then you go and you lie down and you uncover his feet. Once he's laid down and go to sleep, you uncover his feet. And then she says he'll tell you what to do from that point. Well, what it is a redeemer, that's a sign to them. You uncover the feet, and he wakes up and he says, what's going on? And she's laying at his feet. And that's when she answers. She said, I'm Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread thy skirt over thy handmaid, and thou art a near kinsman. So it's not like I uncovered your feet so your feet will get cold and you'll wake up, you got cold feet and wonder why am I getting cold? And here's a nice young maiden right here. Come get under my covers and we'll both stay warm. That's not what's going on here, and that's not what's being talked about here. It's his feet was uncovered. She's recognizing him as her redeemer. She's uncovering him. And then he recognizes her as someone he should and can redeem by allowing his skirt to be placed over her. His skirt, his cover, his blanket, whatever you want to call it. He's saying at that point that I'll take you under my wing. I'll take care of you. I recognize my responsibility as a near kin to you, and I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to redeem. I'm going to be your redeemer. I'm going to take care of you. And so that's what's being done here. And he also told her he understood at this point all the intricacies of this, I would think. And he told her, he blessed her in that she was still a young woman. She didn't have any children. And she could have flouted herself out among the city and said, look, here I am, a young foreign woman. I'm real interesting to you. And go out looking for a young man or go out looking for a rich guy, maybe looking for a sugar daddy or whatever. But she didn't live that way, and she wasn't that kind of a person. That's why he said, and now, my daughter, fear not, I will do thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. everybody in the city, they remembered Naomi when she came to town, and they knew that Naomi and they knew that Ruth, they were good women. They were good people. And they realized that, and he's just recognizing that and telling her that, I understand that some people would have acted differently in this manner, but you haven't. And the city knows that you're a virtuous woman. And it says here that it's important for us to notice in this episode that Naomi and Ruth followed God's law of the kinsman redeemer in seeking protection for themselves. Boaz also did what God expected of him as the potential kinsman redeemer. When we do things God's way, we will always find his protection. But the Lord is faithful, who shall establish you and keep you from evil. That's what we're seeing here. If we follow God's plan, if we will listen to God and wait on God and be patient, he has an avenue to deliver us in whatever situation lies before us. Here's two women that have moved back to town, and they have nothing, probably nothing but what they carried on their backs. And, they could look at the way Israel's society was and think that, it was going to be bad there, it's going to be bad here, it's just the rest of our life is going to be misery. They could have thought that. But they trusted in God, and they knew that God had a plan. And they were just patient, and God was laying this plan out before them. So then picking up in chapter 3, verse 12, and then 4 through 6, 9 and 10. And now it is true that I am thy kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. So he's telling her, yes, I'm your kinsman redeemer. I'm kin to Naomi. I'm kin to Naomi's husband. But there's somebody that's closer kin. There's somebody else. It's like, I might be a second cousin, but there's a first cousin. There's somebody else whose responsibility as the redeemer falls on first. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab. So he's talking to this other kinsman, this person that's closer to Naomi than he is, who came out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. Not just, talking about his brother in the sense that kinfolks, not a literal brother of him. And so what he has done, he's gone down to the city gate where all the business is conducted. That's where people set up temporary tents and things to sell things. That's where the city officials meet. And so when you go and you're going to talk about this kind of process that's laid out in the law, you want to do it before witnesses, you want to do it before the city officials, and you conduct your business out in the open, in public. And so Boaz has gone down here, and he's talking to this other kinsman redeemer who's a little bit closer to Naomi. And he said unto them that he's talking to him about Naomi, our kin that came back from Moab, and he knows who he's talking about. And I thought to advertise thee, saying, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. So he's saying, I could have advertised this, which is a bad connotation. It's not something you want to just throw out there and broadcast to the public. You want to be a little bit discreet about it, but here's Naomi, and it's our responsibility to take care of her. And there's some land, and if you'll redeem it, redeem it. But if not, then I'll take care of it. And I'm not saying that he kind of laid this out but he kind of laid it out in an interesting way here. But he didn't tell him everything, all the responsibilities right up front. So he's telling him, here's Naomi. There's some property. You're the rightful redeemer. You're the first one. It's your right of refusal. You've got the first right to refusal to redeem this. Now, you don't want it to sound like it's a business transaction, the relationships are, but the part of the property and all that is a business transaction. And And he said, I'll redeem it. So Boaz told him, if you want it, great. If you don't, then I'm the next in line and I'll take her. But it's just down to us two. There's not anybody else. It's just us two. And so the guy said, okay, well, I'll redeem it. I'll take it. And he said, then said Boaz, what day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up upon the name of the dead upon his inheritance. So the guy didn't know everything at first. He's just thinking, when he said, I'll redeem it, he's thinking, well, I can add some land to my possessions. I can add some land to my inheritance, is what he said. I'll go ahead and take it, and I'll just improve my side. And then Boaz reminded him, he said, okay, by the way, when you do that, because Naomi was too old to have children. And so when you redeem property, and when you do this through this law, if the woman is still young enough to have children, it's your responsibility to marry her so that she can then conceive a child, hopefully at some point a male child, to inherit this property. So you're not just adding it to your holdings, you're trying to do God's intent is to keep it in the family. And so you're trying to help this kind lady have a male heir to inherit this land. And he knew about Naomi, but apparently he didn't know much about Ruth. And then when he realized that, oh, there's a nice young lady that goes with this, and I'm going to have to marry her, and I'm going to have to be a daddy again. Who knows how old he is? I don't know. He may not want to raise a child and deal with dirty diapers or something. I don't know. But he's got to raise up someone to be able to inherit this land, so it won't just go into his holdings. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. So then he says, oh, I'm out. I don't need another wife. I don't need more children. And it's not going to do me any good anyway. That's the attitude he's got. There wasn't anything benefit to him. He couldn't see how it's going to benefit him. And Boaz is going about this in the proper manner. Boaz is not in it to see what he can get. He's not in it to see what he's going to get out of it. He's in this to provide. He was the one that was so kind to Ruth when he figured out that she was there because they didn't have anything. That she was there helping her mother-in-law out. She was there gleaning grain because her mother-in-law was not able to do it. And he was kind enough to tell his people to leave her some. Not just the grain that fell off by accident and such. He wanted to make sure she was provided for, that both of the women were provided for. So he took extra steps at his own expense to take care of them, help them out. And then when he found out that he was a kinsman redeemer in line to be one, then he was quick to, okay, I'll do my part. He didn't shy away from his responsibilities whatsoever. Not legal responsibilities, but moral responsibilities. There wasn't anything legally that he had to do to provide for Naomi and Ruth when they were out there trying to gather grain. He wasn't legally responsible to marry Ruth because there was someone closer to him. He could have presented it in a way, but he was doing what God would want someone to do, what's right in the heart. And so he said, this other redeemer said, I can't do it. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's, those are the two sons, Naomi's sons, of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, I have purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place ye are witnesses this day. So he's laid this out right there before everybody. I'm the next in line. He didn't want it. I will redeem. And he laid it right out there in front of everybody. And to make notice of this, that he's going to do what's right. And the verse is not in here, but it's interesting too. One of the other customs that they had then, the other kinsman at that point takes off his sandal and hands it to Boaz. It's kind of interesting in that what that signified was this other kinsman had the right to first refusal of this land. Land that he could tread on, that he could walk on, land that could be his. And he gave up his right to this. And to signify his giving up this right and giving it to Boaz and telling Boaz that you have the right to tread on this land, he gives him his sandal. Well, it's kind of neat that, I have the right to tread on this and I give it up, so I give it to you. So here's my sandal, by the way, so that you can tread on this land. So that's how they signify that they agree to this. He says here, even more like the kinsman redeemer who did not redeem for his own profit, but for that of the redeemed. Jesus did not redeem himself or die for his sins, but his redemption is for us to pay our sin debt with his life. For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be righteous of God in him. Jesus Christ is our kinsman redeemer. And of course, everybody knows that's what we're getting to. That this is just all a picture. This is just a symbol of what Jesus Christ is to us. And we'll get to that, of course, in the closing here. But you can see all through this, the parallels here and the similarities of what's going on in this story and how Jesus Christ is our kinsman redeemer, because we can't take care of ourselves. We have no way of reconnecting with God in heaven because of our sin nature. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and he went in unto her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. So Boaz marries Ruth. They have a child. They have a son. And the women told Naomi that the Lord's blessed her. You haven't been left without a kinsman. You haven't been left without someone to inherit your land. Her grandson, she's got a grandson now, and he'll be able to inherit this family land and to carry forward with it. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life and a nourisher of thine age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. They're telling her that, and that's what Naomi had. She is so excited now. Her life has meaning to her. She feels she's fulfilled. And they're telling her that this daughter-in-law that you have, she's been better to you than 7 sons. She's brought forth this son. And just a figure of speech probably or whatever, but you've got a daughter-in-law that's taken care of you and done these things for you. And truly, Ruth had no responsibilities towards Naomi either. You remember, Naomi told her when she was leaving, said, I'm going back home, but y'all go to your home, and it's been a good run, but it's been a sad time, and our lives are coming apart, and we just need to go find family that'll help take care of us. And Ruth, that's paraphrasing it, of course, but Ruth told her, said, I'm with you. I love you. I'm going to take care of you, and we'll get through this together. We're going to, and so here, look what we found. And Naomi took the child and laid it on her bosom and became nurse unto it. So she's got a grandchild that she gets to raise up now. Got to be exciting. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There's a son born to Naomi, and they call his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse and the father of David. So not only do we see once again a foreigner being brought in to this line of Israel, she's the great grandparents to King David. Rahab was introduced into the lineage of Israel, into Jesus' lineage. And here we have a woman from Moab, some people that were bitter enemies and oppressed Israel. But here you have, and to me, that's just once again telling us that We're all God's creation. There's not any one select people. There's Gentiles and Jews. That covers everybody. You're either a Jewish person, one of God's chosen people, or you're a Gentile. And God saves us all. And in fact, it's really neat that He inserts Gentiles along the way into Jesus's lineage, because Jesus is in this lineage as well. So she's the great grandmother to David, and I don't know how many greats to Jesus as you go down through there. But you can count them. You can look at his lineage and see that. But she didn't know any of this stuff. She didn't do any of this to see what she could get out of it. She didn't do this knowing that, okay, if I play this just right, I'm going to be the great-grandmother to one of the greatest kings that Israel ever knew. Of course she didn't know that. She followed God's will because that was what God wanted her to do. Listen to God, follow God's instruction, and trust that God will take care of her, and look what He does. We won't know the importance and purpose of our lives or the events that happen in our lives until you see it from the perspective of eternity. We won't know what we've done, who we've done for, how important it is, or what's going on in our life, what's happened, what this event in our life, how this will steer us. We won't know that during our life necessarily, rarely, probably not at all, until some point in the future. I've mentioned this many times as well, and I asked Paul Buck to sing this at my grandmother Spencer's funeral, but that song, I don't even know the name of it. It's Thank You, basically.
That's it.
That's the name of the song? The guy's talking about he has a dream, and he has a dream, and he's in heaven with his friend. And he's witnessing all these people coming up to his friend, telling him, thank you for all that you've done. And the first person comes up and tells him, this guy don't even have a clue who this person is. He's got no idea what influence he had on his life. But he comes and thanks him. Because of you, I know Jesus Christ is my Savior. And somebody else comes up to him. And they look, and there's a long line of people waiting to come up and thank him for what he did, for serving the Lord, for following God's will. And then, of course, they get to meet Jesus and, thank Jesus for what he did. But we won't know what any of this means until we look at it from the perspective of eternity. Until we're in heaven and we're watching a friend of ours we get to watch a friend of ours